Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we are going to talk about a book which, in my opinion, is one of the most important books we will talk about all year. It is called The Case for God, and the author is Karen Armstrong, and it's published by Alfred A. Knopf, and I'm so glad you had time to come by.
So am I, yes.
You know, you've written many books, translated, as they tell me, into 45 languages. And I was going to ask you how many of those 45 do you read, but I won't ask you that. And then in the biographical note that they sent along, it's like, but she ain't doing books anymore. Since September 11th, however, Karen Armstrong has become chiefly known for her work on Islam and fundamentalism, particularly in the United States. She's addressed the member of the United States Congress and the Senate on 3 occasions, on and on and on. What exactly happened here? And well, I mean, everybody, 9/11, and I've got to do something. And you found something to do.
Well, I had already published 2 books. One was a history of fundamentalism, The Battle for God, and the other was a short history of Islam. And these suddenly acquired a horrible new relevance.
Yeah.
And they were there and in the shops, and so people wanted to talk to me about it. And I happened to be in the States for the first 3 months after 9/11. I was staying at Harvard. I was supposed to be researching a book in the library. I didn't see the inside of a library at all.
You're out running around.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
And then now, currently, you're involved in another very, very important project called the Charter for Compassion.
Yes.
And in what we call the third segment of the show, we're going to talk about that.
Wonderful.
But right now, I want to look at the Case for God, which, and this is a wonderful line from your jacket copy. There's not usually wonderful lines there, but this comes from there. The Case for God details the great lengths to which humankind has gone in order to experience a sacred reality called by many names. That's what this book is all about.
That's what it's about, yes.
Yeah, that desire, the urge, the necessity.
We seem to be human beings. We have always, from as far as we can tell, from as soon as Homo sapiens became Homo sapiens, we wanted to live in relation to a transcendence. It's one of the peculiar characteristics of the human mind that we have ideas and concepts and experiences that go beyond our conceptual grasp, and we seek these out moments when we feel deeply touched within and lifted momentarily beyond ourselves. Music, for example, does that to us.
That's right.
And it's a very rational art. It's based closely related to mathematics, but it segues into a kind of knowing that doesn't depend on logic. And it's very hard to say what a late Beethoven quartet is about, but it is telling us something. It takes reason to the limits. And that's what theology is supposed to do at its best, not to give us information about God, factual information.
Doesn't answer questions.
It's at its best when it asks questions and holds us in an attitude of wonder. And it's often at its worst when it seeks to answer some of these questions. Religion is not about providing explanations for the origin of the universe. We can find that out by our powers of reason, logos. But it's about dealing with those questions for which there are no easy answers. Pain, suffering, our mortality that we have to live with. The injustice and pain we see in life, as well as the wonder we see in the universe. Yes. That fills us with a sense of awe and delight. And it's the same kind of wonder that we find in works of art that also make us look more deeply at things.
I don't want to wander too far away from these thoughts, because there is something in the book which I wrote down about music. It is also music, the most corporeal of the arts. It is produced by breath, voice, horsehair, shells, gut, and skins, and reaches resonances in our body at levels deeper than will or consciousness. Yet, this intensely rational activity segues into transcendence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and we seek that out. And music, of course, has always been part of religious experience.
Yes, it has, yeah.
And religion and theology has always expressed itself best in terms of art, in painting, in drama, in dance, in poetry, music, and it's been at its most unhappy when it's pushed into a rationalistic scientific mode.
Yeah, let's sit down and talk about it. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The case for God has a whole chapter devoted to silence. Among others, it tells the story of a thinker whose name I don't think I can pronounce. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
The Case for God is the book today. The author of the wonderful Karen Armstrong, the publisher Alfred A. Knopf, and a nice gentleman from Los Angeles, Jonathan Kirsch, who's the author of books like The Harlot by the Side of the Road. Great title. He says, in part, no one is better qualified or more needed than Karen Armstrong to enter the hot public debate between believers and non-believers over the existence of God. Her latest book, eagerly awaited and received, rings out with the qualities she brings to all of her work. The Case for God is lucid, learned, provocative, and illuminating. Indeed, Armstrong once again does what she always does best by shining a clear light on the deepest mysteries of the religious imagination. So there you are, entering that hot public debate. And we're going to talk about that. We'll get to that, I hope. But I want you now to talk about the guy whose name I'm not sure I can pronounce. It's spelled Denys, the Areopagite,
the Areopagite.
Thank you very much. It was also known as the Pseudo-Dionysius.
Yes, well, Denys is simply the...
Oh, Denys.
Denys.
Denys is Denys.
Denys is simply the anglicized version of Dionysius. That's...
Oh, is that what that is?
That's all it is. Now, Denys the Areopagite was a pseudonym, a pen name, and it was the name of St. Paul's first convert in Athens.
Yeah.
And but he was actually a monk living in the 5th or 6th centuries, and writing anonymously.
And his thoughts, his full-fledged spirituality, got in circulation around the 9th century?
Yes, it reached the West in the 9th century when it was translated into Latin. And then Denys became a major, major authority, cited by everybody in Europe. And the fact that nobody hears about him today is a symptom of our religious predicament.
This is really sad because he had
got it all.
He had some good things going on. He saw creation, for example, as an almost erotic eruption of divine goodness.
Yes,
that's wonderful.
Isn't it wonderful?
That's wonderful. He also saw it, and this is very important, as a continuous, timeless process.
Yes, and it's still going on. And also he said, you cannot think about God making the world as if he were a mere artisan. We cannot read the Bible in a literal way, he said. And he asked people to think about what they were saying when they spoke about God and realize, as they sort of questioned themselves, what does it mean to say that God exists? God does not exist like this table or you or me or a tree.
Right.
Because that's all. Our notion of existence is too limited. So how do we speak about God? We segue into silence.
That's where silence becomes so important. When words cannot do anything, then we must go to silence.
And it's like when you go to the symphony, And as the last notes die away, there's often a beat of very pregnant silence in the hall before the applause starts. Mm-hmm. That's the point which good theology, and Dennis is one of those good theologians, should bring you to realize that we are at the threshold, at the end of what words and thoughts could do, but on the brink of a different kind of perception.
Now, there are three fellows out there who are not keeping silent. The new atheists, we call them, Dawkins, Hitchens, and Harris. Mm-hmm. And in your introduction, I think you say their argument is weak because they equate all believers in believing with fundamentalist Christians.
Yes, they say that religion is essentially fundamentalist. Now, fundamentalism is a new form of faith. It's an innovative form of faith. It is a break with tradition, funnily enough, and not at all characteristic of the hugely complex nature of religious traditions, which consists of myriad strands. And so by focusing simply on fundamentalism, they are therefore concentrating on a very peculiar and not very skillful form of religion.
Well, that kind of angers me, and I'll tell you why. I know Hitchens a bit. I mean, I've worked with him here in San Francisco. Harris, I think I've heard once, and the other gentleman, I don't have any personal experience of. But in terms of Hitchens and Harris, we're not talking about dumb guys.
No.
So why do they go so dumb when it comes to religion?
Well, they are talking about what they don't know much really about religion, and they want to get rid of it. They see themselves in the vanguard of a movement, a rational scientific movement, which will expunge God from human consciousness.
Now, I'm going to tell you something you're not going to like. We are now going to do something we don't usually do in our third segment. We're not going to talk about the case for God anymore, but rather about something else that Karen Armstrong is up to. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
The Case for God. Karen Armstrong, the author. Knopf is the publisher. And this is a book that is really going to stretch your mind. It's going to make you grow intellectually. And you're going to enjoy it because she's a damn good writer. Christopher Hart is a fellow who said something very nice about the book. He wrote in something called the Sunday Times. That's in London, I take it. The Case for God simmers with a quiet spiritual optimism. Oh, yes, it does. It is dense and brilliant, chastening and consoling. Whether or not it sells as well as the latest Hitchens or Dawkins will be a measure of us, not the book. He's on your side.
Yes, he certainly is.
Yes. And then this wonderful closing line. I love this. Reading Armstrong after these boys is like listening to a clever and kindly adult after a bunch of strident adolescents. Take that, Hitchens. Take that, Dawkins. Oh, dear. But right now, what's on your mind is something that's going to have a major part of it the day that this broadcast will be, this coming Sunday. We have to figure this one out. You are involved with something called the Charter for Compassion, which is a collaborative effort to build a peaceful and harmonious global community, bringing together the voices of people from all religions. The Charter seeks to remind the world that while all faiths are not the same, they all share the core principle of compassion and the Golden Rule. The Charter will change the tenor of the conversation around religion. It will be a clarion call to the world. Now, before I have you comment, I want to talk about the events, lest we lose our airtime. September 27th, today, because that's when this is airing, is called the Nobel Laureate event?
There's a peace summit in Vancouver where Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and the Dalai Lama are being honored by the Fetzer Foundation for their work in love and forgiveness.
Now, people can see or hear this on TED.com?
Yes, they can. They can tune into it. But my event, it will be in the afternoon. The Dalai Lama Center invited me to take part in this in order to talk about the Charter for Compassion and announce it to the world that it's going to be launched on November the 12th. In a major global...
That's right, the unveiling of the Charter to the world.
On Sunday, that's today, there will be the new website for the Charter will be launched, and you can find out all about it on charterforcompassion.org.
Charterforcompassion.org. You can find all about it.
And the idea behind it was that all the world religions keep bringing me back in my studies to the golden rule and compassion, which they say is the center of religion.
Fascinating.
And yet we rarely hear about it. So all too often when we hear the strident voices of hatred, we hear condemnation of this and that, or abstruse doctrinal statements. Mm-hmm. And we don't hear enough about compassion. And the world needs compassion. Because unless we learn to implement the golden rule, don't do to others what you would not like them to do to you, in a global way, treating all nations as we would wish to be treated ourselves, I doubt that we'll have a viable world to hand on to the next generation. And religion, which should be helping to build this global community, is often seen as part of the problem. So I want to make the compassionate voice of religion come to the fore. The Charter's been composed by leading thinkers in Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism.
It's a marvelous interfaith effort, isn't it?
It is, and it was a wonderful meeting we've had. And also people contributed to the Charter online from all over the world. It was a multilingual site, and they were responding in Arabic, Hebrew, Urdu, English and Spanish.
And one of the things that it says in the material on the Charter, it says the Charter for Compassion will not be a new organization, because there are hundreds of existing ones.
Yeah, but it's to bring all the existing organizations together. We've now got 50 partners worldwide, and more and more people are coming in every day.
50?
We hoped that by November 12th, we're going to have over 100. From all over the world, from the Muslim world, from Africa and Europe and the West.
And going back to what's happening today, it says here, a live stream event of Nobel laureates discussing compassion. It will play on TED.com. Do you have any sense of what time?
I think it will be at 3:00 in the afternoon. So
East Coast time?
West Coast time.
Oh, splendid. It's not at 6:00 when we're on. Good scheduling and good work. And it's wonderful of you to be involved in something like the Charter for Compassion. But I'm not surprised, because Karen Armstrong's a great author, a deep researcher, and more importantly, a wonderful, truthful seeker of the truth. The Case for God, Karen Armstrong. This is Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.